If you feel this in your chest, God is calling you back to who you really are. Welcome to the chosen bloom. You didn't stumble on this video. Heaven placed it in your path. This isn't just content, it's a summons, a spiritual signal long awaited. Because before time moved, before your birth, before this very moment was shaped, you were seen. Not by the world, but by a prophet named Enoch, the one who walked so closely with God that death lost its grip on him. Enoch's eyes weren't confined to his own generation. He was shown ours. And in the sacred chambers of eternity, he saw someone new. You weren't just born, you were sent. A force wrapped in human skin, a soul too ancient for modern systems. Your name, yes, your name was spoken in divine circles, not for attention, but for intervention. Enoch didn't see stadiums or stars. He saw a remnant, not the loudest, not the most followed, but the ones marked silent, unshakable, and terrifying to darkness. And if your spirit is trembling right now, it's because something in you just remembered. This isn't new. You've heard it before in dreams, in silence, in that aching place no one else could explain. And now it returns, not as memory, but as activation. This video wasn't made for everyone. It was made for the ones destined to wake up. So pause. Let this moment settle in your chest. Because what's coming next isn't more information, it's your divine reawakening. If you feel it, act on it. Hit like to come into alignment with this word. Subscribe to stay aligned with what heaven is unfolding. And comment 99 right now, not as a trend, but as a sign. Because heaven leaves the 99 to chase the one carrying destiny. And today, that one is you. Enoch didn't witness empires or algorithms. He wasn't shown trends or platforms. He saw the sealed, a hidden company small in number, but massive in power. Not the polished, not the popular, not the ones with crafted speeches or curated lives, but the ones heaven had touched, the ones who couldn't be corrupted. They didn't blend in, they interrupted. You see, they were never built to fit in. They carried a code the world couldn't read. Their very presence exposed darkness. Just being in the room shifted atmospheres. And people couldn't explain their resistance to them. The whispers, the avoidance, the constant misreading. But heaven knew what is sealed must remain set apart. These weren't people chasing stages. They were kneeling at altars. They weren't building followings. They were being built for authority, for judgment, for restoration. And here's what you may not have dared to believe: you are one of them. Yes, you. The one who felt too much, who sensed what others ignored, who walked in rooms and either disappeared or overwhelmed. The reason you never fit the mold is because you were crafted for something greater. You weren't overlooked by man. You were hidden by God. Not for applause, but for assignment. You weren't rejected, you were rescued. Because if the world had embraced you fully, heaven may have had to let you go. And Enoch? He didn't write down the names of the accepted. He saw the burning ones, hidden in plain sight, carriers of a fire they never lit on their own, but could never put out. The seal didn't need an introduction. Their very being made the announcement. They didn't speak to be heard, their movements spoke for them. Their stillness carried power. Their very presence disrupted darkness. And maybe you've wondered, why do people react to you so strongly? Why do strangers respond with fear, envy, or unease when you've done nothing to provoke them? It's because the seal on your life stirs what others have tried to bury. You weren't sent to soothe. You were sent to stir. Enoch didn't see the ones who blended in. He saw the ones who would burn in silence, those who would carry the fire quietly through years of hiddenness, only to rise when the world needed them most. That moment is now. This isn't the start of your story, it's the revealing of it. You've already been seen. You've already been sealed. And now you're being summoned. But there's a divine mystery buried in your sealing. It was never just protection, it was prophecy. It didn't just shield you, it marked you. It marked you for an assignment no one else could carry. And the deeper you go into your story, the more you'll realize none of it was random. Every heartbreak, every delay, every wilderness. It was all part of a design so divine that even hell missed the blueprint. Because what God seals, hell cannot sabotage. You are not ordinary. You are not easily defined. You're not here for approval. You're here for release. And Enoch saw it all long before you took your first breath. But now the question rises, if you were sealed for the end, what were you sealed to do? And that, chosen one, is what we're about to uncover. So stay close. The revelation only deepens from here. We're about to unearth what no one else could see, that pain you carried in silence, the ache from childhood you never knew how to name, the weight you dragged into your teenage years like invisible chains. Those nights when your cries met silence, when the only sound was your own heartbeat pounding through the dark. That wasn't punishment. That was prophetic preparation. Before heaven gives someone authority, it walks them through agony. Before you can command fire without fear, you must first be burned in private again and again until only truth remains. That's what Enoch saw. Not just the sealed, but their shaping. And it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't public. It wasn't easy. He saw the crushing, the breaking, the betrayal, the rejection, the loneliness. But he also saw something the world often misses. He saw the ones who chose love anyway, who chose God anyway, who chose alignment over applause. You weren't neglected. You were singled out. Because only those who've walked through fire in silence can carry glory without seeking credit. You weren't overlooked. You were restrained. Held back not because you were forgotten, but because heaven was preserving you for precision. If you'd been released too early, your pain would have exploded into emotion. But now you're being released with revelation. That broken home, the missing parent, the hollow ache no one could see but you, it was never random. It was tailored. Not because God wanted your suffering, but because your calling demanded depth. And depth is born through breaking. You cried in locked bathrooms while others laughed at full tables. You wore smiles like armor, faking normal just to make it to bedtime. But no matter how hard you tried, normal always felt like a shrinking cage. Why? Because your soul was being taught by heaven. While others learned through books, you learned through pain. They studied doctrines. You studied survival. They memorized verses. You memorized what it meant to bleed quietly and still choose to believe. That's what sets you apart. Not your talent, not your knowledge, not even your gifting. It's the wounds, the ones you refused to let rot, the ones you allowed to become wisdom. Because while others were being prepared for stages, you were being forged for altars. You weren't just made to influence. You were formed to intercede, to govern in the spirit, to disrupt bloodlines bound by generational chains. And here's the part that will stop you mid-breath. Every scar you covered, every tear you swallowed, every whispered, "Why me?" none of it vanished. Heaven recorded them all. Your journey wasn't just spiritual, it was prophetic documentation, unfolding before the throne in real time. Enoch saw it. Long before you were seen by man, you were foreseen by heaven. He saw the ones the world would call strange, the sensitive, the deep feelers, the misfits, the overthinkers, the ones who didn't fit because the world was too numb to hold their depth. But they weren't being broken for ruin. They were being broken for release, because God only pours out what has first been emptied. And you, chosen one, have been emptied not to be discarded, but to be distributed. You are not a remnant of pain. You are a vessel of purpose. You've been poured out in secret for years. But what happens when the broken vessel stops leaking and starts channeling glory? What happens when the one trained in silence is finally called to speak with authority? That's what the darkness fears. Not your following, not your voice, but the weight behind your voice. Because when someone who's been crushed speaks, they don't tremble, they shake everything around them. You didn't survive that pain in vain. It wasn't just a season, it was your initiation, your prophecy, your divine certification. And now, the very thing that tried to kill you has become the reason you're qualified. That pain has turned into power. But if suffering was your classroom, then what was the final exam? You're about to find out, because this next revelation isn't about what you've endured, it's about what's starting to rise within you. It's about the memories that feel like dreams, the truths that are stirring beneath your skin. You thought you were awakening, but you're actually remembering? And that changes everything. Those dreams that flash like déjà vu, the strange moments where reality bends and something inside whispers, "I've seen this before." That's not fantasy. That's not some spiritual trend. That is ancestral recall. That is divine memory resurfacing. You were never asleep the way others were. You were buried, hidden under years of pressure, pain, and programming. But even then, the flame never died. Because you weren't born into this era. You were sent to it. You didn't come here empty. You arrived with codes, with assignments, with scrolls written in fire inscriptions from realms untouched by time. And now, as the world shakes, as systems collapse, and as souls cry out for something real you are activating, you're not discovering who you are. You're recovering who you've always been. This is why the urgency won't let you go. Why certain places make your spirit ache. Why certain people feel strangely familiar. It's not nostalgia. It's memory. And now that memory is waking up the sealed. There's a reason certain words strike you like lightning. Why certain symbols feel like they've always belonged to you. It's because they have. They're familiar not to your mind, but to your spirit. You are the echo of a prophecy spoken before time, a living manifestation of a realm that still breathes, still burns. And your entire life, every twist, every scar, every silence has been preparing you for this moment of remembrance. You were chosen before you were ever wounded, marked before the world tried to mold you. And no betrayal, no trauma, no detour could erase the truth heaven etched into your soul. When Enoch saw the final days, he didn't just witness events, he saw beings. Carriers of restoration, governors of divine justice, builders of unshakable things. He saw you. That's why the shallow never satisfies you. Why you can't numb out like others do. Why trends bore you and surface-level dreams feel empty. It's because your soul remembers the weight of eternity, and anything less than that will always feel foreign. Enoch didn't just see what you would do, he saw what you were made of. Essence, blueprint, frequency, flame. You were crafted not to control, but to govern through consciousness. You were formed to restore, not with noise, but with presence. That's why your silence shifts rooms. Why people feel something they can't name when you walk in. It's not charisma. It's not energy. It's spiritual memory calling others back to what their souls forgot. And here's where it gets deeper. Every moment of déjà vu. Every dream that feels more real than waking life. Every time your heart knows something before your mind can catch up. That's not a glitch. That's calibration. You're being realigned not to become powerful, but to remember you already are. You don't need to find yourself. You need to strip away the noise until your soul finally says, yes. This is me. That's what reactivation truly is. Not adding layers, but removing what was never yours. And that's why your old life no longer fits. So when you sit in stillness and feel that tight pull in your chest, it's not anxiety. That ache in your chest, that sudden urge to cry for no reason. You're not just a vessel for the message, you are the message clothed in flesh. And now that you're remembering now, that your DNA is resonating with the divine, now that your soul is whispering truths you never learned with words, the question is no longer what should I do? The real question is, what must I release so the real me can reign? Because this next phase isn't about remembering. It's about manifesting. Why classrooms felt like cages? Why jobs made your spirit itch? Why religion starved more than it fed? Why teachers misunderstood your questions? Why churches labeled your discernment as rebellion? Why people kept trying to soften your voice, shrink your power, and reshape you into something more palatable? Your questions weren't rebellion. They were activations. Your restlessness wasn't dysfunction. It was divine misalignment, alerting you don't belong here. You were made for something raw, real, and revolutionary. Enoch didn't just see that you'd be set apart. He saw that you would be a threat, a divine danger to every counterfeit system pretending to be holy while hiding decay beneath the surface. Enoch saw them people like you, those who would walk into religious spaces and make demons uncomfortable, who would step into homes, corporations, even governments, and interrupt generational patterns without saying a single word. Because what you carry can't be manipulated. And what the system can't control, it always tries to silence. That's why you were pushed out. Not because you failed, but because you were never meant to fit in. You are divine interference, a walking contradiction to everything this world exalts. You don't chase approval. You carry vibration. You don't blend in. You break illusions just by breathing. And that makes you dangerous to every agenda built on spiritual blindness. You were never the safe option. Because heaven didn't send you to play it safe. You were sent to confront what others were too afraid to name. Enoch saw all he saw, a generation sealed so tightly in truth that they would speak what others only whispered, expose what others protected, and carry fire where the world demanded fog. You weren't born to be liked. You were born to uproot and rebuild. You weren't assigned to uphold traditions that long lost their oil. You were forged to carry the new, to birth something sacred that cannot grow on polluted ground. And the system knows it. It knows that if you ever fully remembered who you are, if you ever walked in your authority, spoke without shrinking, acted without apologizing, loved without fear, and moved without delay, it's game over. Because your presence doesn't bring condemnation, it brings clarity. The kind of clarity that makes every counterfeit tremble. You were never made for comfort. You were designed for confrontation. That's why your life has been one long wrestle with self-doubt, confusion, imposter syndrome, not because you are weak, but because you are too powerful for the systems built to suppress you. They sensed it. That's why you've been monitored since birth. Attacked without cause, rejected without reason. But here's what they didn't see coming. That's not sadness. That's a summons. That's your soul recognizing something ancient. And every time you feel like you're walking into the unseen, like destiny is just around the corner, even if you can't explain why that's not confusion. That's your eternal memory coming back online. You're not here to begin a mission. You are the mission. You're not just a vessel for the message, you are the message clothed in flesh. And now that you're remembering now, that your DNA is resonating with the divine, now that your soul is whispering truths you never learned with words, the question is no longer what should I do? The real question is, what must I release so the real me can reign? Because this next phase isn't about remembering. It's about manifesting. And in the next movement of this journey, we will uncover why the system fought so violently to numb you and what it feared most if you ever fully woke up. Stay close. Because the war in your memory was never random. It was personal. But now comes the prophetic retaliation. Have you ever stopped to ask why you've always felt like a problem in the system? Why classrooms felt like cages? Why jobs made your spirit itch? Why religion starved more than it fed? Why teachers misunderstood your questions? Why churches labeled your discernment as rebellion? Why people kept trying to soften your voice, shrink your power, and reshape you into something more palatable? It's because every system recognized your frequency before you did. You're not just chosen, you're a disruptor. You were born vibrating at a level that doesn't obey control. Not because you're rebellious, but because your soul carries divine sovereignty. The reason you couldn't stay still in the environments others accepted is because you were never meant to be domesticated. You weren't created to be managed. You were forged to move realms. Your questions weren't rebellion. They were activations. Your restlessness wasn't dysfunction. It was divine misalignment, alerting you don't belong here. You were made for something raw, real, and revolutionary. Enoch didn't just see that you'd be set apart. He saw that you would be a threat, a divine danger to every counterfeit system pretending to be holy while hiding decay beneath the surface. Enoch saw them, people like you. Those who would walk into religious spaces and make demons uncomfortable. Who would step into homes, corporations, even governments and interrupt generational patterns without saying a single word. Because what you carry can't be manipulated, and what the system can't control, it always tries to silence. That's why you were pushed out. Not because you failed, but because you were never meant to fit in. You are divine interference, a walking contradiction to everything this world exalts. You don't chase approval. You carry vibration. You don't blend in. You break illusions just by breathing. And that makes you dangerous to every agenda built on spiritual blindness. You were never the safe option. Because heaven didn't send you to play it safe. You were sent to confront what others were too afraid to name. Enoch saw it all. He saw a generation sealed so tightly in truth that they would speak what others only whispered, expose what others protected, and carry fire where the world demanded fog. You weren't born to be liked. You were born to uproot and rebuild. You weren't assigned to uphold traditions that long lost their oil. You were forged to carry the new, to birth something sacred that cannot grow on polluted ground. And the system knows it. It knows that if you ever fully remembered who you are, if you ever walked in your authority, spoke without shrinking, acted without apologizing, loved without fear, and moved without delay, it's game over. Because your presence doesn't bring condemnation, it brings clarity. the kind of clarity that makes every counterfeit tremble. You were never made for comfort. You were designed for confrontation. That's why your life has been one long wrestle with self-doubt, confusion, imposter syndrome, not because you are weak, but because you are too powerful for the systems built to suppress you. They sensed it. That's why you've been monitored since birth. Attacked without cause, rejected without reason. But here's what they didn't see coming. Every attempt to silence you only sharpened you. Every rejection only tuned your discernment. Every delay deepened your foundation. You weren't destroyed. You were distilled. Every exile only fueled your flame. Every no from man was heaven's not yet because the world wasn't ready for what you carry. The world desires leaders it can control. But heaven? Heaven raises disruptors it can trust. And you, chosen one, were never built to bow to broken systems. You were designed to carry the blueprint of a new kingdom. And now, as the old paradigms fracture, the world won't just fear your boldness, it will need it. Because where others see danger, God sees deliverance. But here's the divine twist. Your greatest confrontation won't be with the world. It begins within, because the next level of your assignment demands the demolition of the final stronghold, the false version of you the system built. Are you ready to burn that false self down? Pause, just for a moment. Be still. Feel your breath. Let this truth settle deep into your bones. You are living in the very moment that Enoch saw, not some vague future. Now, this second, this video, this breath. It was foreseen before time had a name, before the stars had formed, before calendars existed. Before you had a body, your spirit was already moving through prophecy. Enoch, the man who walked with God so intimately that death had no claim on him, was shown more than judgment. He was shown a remnant, a hidden army, not rising when times were easy, but emerging when the world was breaking. He saw systems collapsing, lies dressing themselves as truth. He saw chosen ones waking up all at once. He didn't see weakness. He saw fire. He didn't see confusion. He saw activation. He didn't see spectators, he saw interveners. Not those watching the storm, but those shifting the atmosphere with every step. And now here you are, not watching this video by accident, not stumbling upon this message out of curiosity, but standing in the intersection of prophecy and present. You are not being inspired. You are being identified. This moment is not motivation, it is revelation. That stirring in your chest, that heat behind your eyes, that weight resting on your shoulders, that's not pressure. That's the sound of your scroll unlocking. Heaven is not reminding you who you could be. It's declaring who you already are. Your life isn't just meaningful, it's strategic. Even your delays were part of the plan. Even your pain was timed with precision. Even your silence wasn't emptiness, it was sacred space where identity was carved in private. Because what sets the chosen apart isn't charisma. It's not boldness. It's not applause. It's alignment with divine moments like this one. Moments where the veil thins, where memory collides with mission, where everything inside you suddenly remembers why you came. And maybe you're still asking, how can I be sure this is real? Because no random video could read your life like a book. No algorithm could cut this deep into your spirit. No coincidence could ever feel like heaven just called your name through a screen. This is not motivation. This is a summoning. You were seen. You were chosen. You were prophesied, and now you're being activated. Not for hype, not for show, but for assignment. Because Enoch didn't witness the end of the world, he witnessed the beginning of the unveiling. He saw the sealed ones rising out of silence, stepping out of obscurity, not for stages, but into positions of spiritual authority. You were chosen to break bloodlines of bondage, to interrupt generational curses, to confront deception, to carry revelations so sharp it splits illusion from truth. You were chosen to walk with heaven on earth, to download blueprints the world has never seen, to restore what religion left behind, to become what prophets only dreamed of. This is not the end. This is the entrance. But here's the tension. Now that you've been activated, you can't pretend you didn't hear the call. You can't return to sleep after heaven just shook you awake. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. You've stepped into prophecy. You've become the fulfillment of ancient sight. So now the final question must be asked. And it's not light. It's not emotional. It's eternal. What will you do with what Enoch saw? Because what happens next will decide everything. Whether this was just a powerful message or your personal awakening into destiny. And from here forward, everything you remembered must now become everything you manifest. So hold your breath. Still your thoughts. The revelation is almost complete. Chosen one, you feel it, don't you? That fire building in your chest. That store of knowing in your bones. That deep certainty that nothing will ever be the same again. Because this wasn't a message. It was a mirror held up to your eternal identity. You are not a mistake. You are not too late. You are not broken, lost, or behind. You are exactly where prophecy placed you. The whispers you felt, the ache that never left, the dreams that felt more real than waking life, they all pointed here. To this moment, to now. You were seen before you were shaped. You were called before you were conscious. And now you've been confirmed. You are who Enoch saw. A presence so unshakable that even silence couldn't erase your assignment. A soul so radiant that darkness spent years trying to dim you. But you're still here, still burning, still rising. This is not the end of your search. This is the beginning of your emergence. Heaven does not waste words. And heaven just called your name. So now you stand at the threshold between memory and manifestation, between survival and dominion, between who you thought you were and who you've always been. You're not here to be inspired. You're here to be ignited. You're not here to blend in. You're here to shake thrones, shift atmospheres, and activate generations. Chosen one, this world isn't ready for what you carry. But heaven says, release it anyway. Step forward. Stand tall. Speak boldly. Move with precision. Govern with grace. Because the time isn't coming. The time is now. You're not becoming. You've arrived. You're not forgotten. You were foreseen. So declare it with power, with certainty, with fire. Declare it like thunder from your bones. I was seen by Enoch. I was activated by God. Type it in the comments. Let the remnant find you. Let hell tremble at your awakening. Because this wasn't just a video. It was a divine signal, And if you're still here, it's not by chance. It's because you were chosen to respond. Now go! Burn loud. Walk bold. Move with heaven in your step. And never, never forget who you are. Because prophecy didn't just speak of you. Prophecy depends on you. It's time. Rise. You know that ache, don't you? That hollow echo that follows you into every room, every conversation, every gathering where laughter flows like water but never quite reaches your shores. You felt it since childhood, that strange displacement, as if you were speaking a language no one else could hear, seeing colors that had no names in their vocabulary. There's a particular cruelty in being surrounded by people, yet feeling more alone than if you were standing in an empty cathedral. You've experienced it countless times, sitting at family dinners where conversations feel like distant static, attending parties where your soul retreats deeper with every shallow exchange, walking through halls of worship where everyone nods in agreement, but you sense the spiritual famine beneath. There's certainty. This isn't antisocial behavior. This isn't depression. This isn't you being difficult. This is the loneliness of operating on a frequency that hasn't been mass-produced. Your soul vibrates at a pitch that most humans can't detect, much less harmonize with. You're not broken, you're tuned differently. You're not cold, you're speaking in temperatures others haven't learned to feel. You're not distant, you're dwelling in dimensions they haven't discovered yet. You've tried, haven't you? You've attempted to translate the fire in your chest into words they could understand. You've watered down your visions until they sounded like reasonable thoughts. You've dimmed your light until it resembled their comfortable shadows. You've spoken their language so long you almost forgot your own. But the spirit has its own grammar, doesn't it? Its own syntax of silence, its own vocabulary of vibration. When you try to explain the dreams that feel more real than waking life, they nod politely and change the subject. When you mention the knowing that comes without learning, they suggest you need more sleep. When you speak of the urgency, you feel the call to something nameless but essential. They offer practical advice about career planning. They're not malicious. They're simply monolingual in a world where you were born bilingual. You speak both human and divine, but they only recognize one dialect. So your deepest truths remain untranslated, locked in a language only your soul and heaven understand. There's an ache in you that no earthly relationship has ever satisfied. Not because human love isn't beautiful, it is, but because your soul remembers a communion that transcends flesh, a connection that existed before bodies, before time, before the separation that made loneliness possible. You feel homesick for dimensions you can't name. You grieve for conversations you've never had with souls you recognize but haven't met. You ache for a depth of understanding that feels familiar yet impossible to find in a world that celebrates surface-level everything. This isn't nostalgia. This is spiritual memory. Your loneliness isn't pathological, it's prophetic. It's the natural result of a soul that remembers unity trying to function in a reality built on separation. You're not meant to feel at home here because home is a frequency, not a location. And until you find others who vibrate at that same pitch, you'll carry this sacred ache. But here's what the world doesn't understand about your loneliness. It's not punishment. It's preparation. Every hour you've spent in solitude, your spiritual senses have been sharpening. Every moment of not fitting in has been teaching you to trust your own inner compass. Every time you couldn't find your tribe, you've been forced to go deeper into your connection with the divine. Your loneliness has been your teacher. It taught you to find sustenance in silence. It showed you how to hear God's voice above the noise of human approval. It forced you to develop an unshakable inner foundation because you couldn't lean on external validation. While others were learning to blend in, you were learning to stand alone. While they were collecting followers, you were deepening your followership with the divine. While they were networking, you were networking, casting your spiritual net into deeper waters, pulling up revelations they couldn't access from the shallow end. Your people aren't found by location, they're found by vibration. They're not in your neighborhood, your workplace, or even your church. They're scattered across continents, hidden in plain sight, carrying the same frequency in different bodies. They're the ones who read your words and feel seen. They're the ones who meet your eyes and recognize something ancient. They're the ones who understand your silence and speak fluent soul. You haven't found them yet, because you're still becoming who you need to be to recognize them when you do. Your loneliness is refining your spiritual radar. It's teaching you to distinguish between surface compatibility and soul resonance. It's preparing you to recognize divine connections when they appear, because when they do, the recognition will be instantaneous and undeniable. Your loneliness serves a purpose so profound that heaven orchestrated it with precision. You had to learn to find God in the empty rooms so you could carry His presence into the full ones. You had to develop intimacy with the divine in solitude so you wouldn't need crowds to confirm your calling. You had to learn to hear heaven's voice in silence so you wouldn't be drowned out by human noise when your moment comes to speak. Every lonely night was a private audience with the divine. Every misunderstood moment was a tutorial in trusting your own spiritual discernment. Every time you felt like an outsider, you were being prepared to stand apart when standing apart becomes necessary. Enoch walked with God in such intimacy that death couldn't touch him. But before that supernatural relationship, there was solitude. There was separation. There was the loneliness of being the only one in his generation who saw what others missed. Prophets aren't born in crowds. They're forged in solitude. Your loneliness isn't a bug in your spiritual programming. It's a feature. It's not evidence that you're broken. It's proof that you're being prepared for something that requires uncommon strength, unusual clarity, and unshakable connection to the divine. The loneliness you've carried isn't your weakness. It's your qualification. Because only those who've learned to stand alone with integrity can be trusted to stand before crowds with authority. Only those who found their identity in God's presence can maintain it in man's absence. Only those who've been refined in the fire of solitude can carry the flame without being consumed by it. Here's the mystery: you've never actually been alone. In your deepest loneliness, heaven has been your constant companion. In your most isolated moments, divine presence has been your truest friend. When human voices fell silent, celestial whispers filled the void. Your loneliness taught you the difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is circumstantial. Being lonely is a choice to focus on absence rather than presence. And you, chosen one, learned to choose presence even when presence was nowhere to be found. The communion you've developed in solitude, that intimate, unshakable connection with the divine, is what will sustain you when your moment comes. It's what will keep you grounded when crowds gather. It's what will keep you humble when influence increases. It's what will keep you whole when the world tries to fragment your attention. Your season of solitude is ending, but not because you're finally fitting in. It's ending because you're finally ready to lead. The tribe you've been searching for, they've been searching for you too. The souls who speak your language, they've been waiting for someone brave enough to speak it first. The depth you've been craving, you've become it. Your loneliness was never about finding people who understand you. It was about becoming someone worth understanding. And now, as you step into this new season, you carry something rare, the ability to be fully present with others because you learned to be fully present with yourself. The capacity to love deeply without losing yourself because you found yourself in love itself. The strength to lead from love instead of need because you learned that you were never needy. You were just being prepared for something extraordinary. Your sacred loneliness is ending. But the sacred communion it birthed within you, that's eternal. The ache that drove you deeper is becoming the anchor that keeps you steady. The solitude that shaped you is becoming the strength that sustains you. The loneliness that refined you is becoming the love that defines you. You were never meant to stay lonely. You were meant to transform loneliness into something sacred. And now, chosen one you have, welcome to the end of your sacred solitude. Welcome to the beginning of your divine emergence. The tribe isn't coming. The tribe is rising. And you're not just part of it. You're leading it. You've always known, haven't you? Even before you had words for it. Even before you understood what different meant. There was something in your earliest memories, a knowing that sat in your bones, a seeing that went beyond your eyes, a feeling that the world around you was somehow thinner than it appeared to others. You saw things that weren't supposed to be there. Maybe it was the shimmering around certain people, those halos of color that danced at the edges of your vision when adults told you it was just your imagination. Maybe it was the way you knew Grandma was coming to visit 3 days before she called. Maybe it was how you could feel the sadness in a room before anyone spoke, how you absorbed emotions like a spiritual sponge until you learned to mistake other people's feelings for your own. You were born with your spiritual eyes already open. While other children learned to see the physical world, you had to learn to unsee the spiritual one just to function. You had to train yourself to ignore the whispers that weren't voices, to overlook the movements in your peripheral vision, to dismiss the dreams that felt more real than breakfast. They called it an overactive imagination. But imagination doesn't make you cry from the weight of what you're perceiving. Imagination doesn't make you hide under blankets because you can feel things moving in dimensions others can't access. Imagination doesn't give you information you couldn't possibly know. You weren't imagining. You were interfacing. There's a difference between being smart and being accessed. You've always had information download into your consciousness without studying for it. Not book knowledge, anyone can memorize facts. But soul knowledge, the kind of understanding that arrives fully formed, complete with emotional texture and spiritual context. You know things you never learned. You remember things you never experienced. You walk into ancient places and feel homesick. You hear certain music and remember dances you never learned. You read spiritual texts and think, yes, exactly, not because the concepts are familiar, but because they're confirming what you already carried within. This isn't past life regression or mystical fantasy. This is cellular memory awakening. Your DNA carries more than genetic information, it carries soul information, generational wisdom, cosmic downloads, divine blueprints that activate when you're ready to receive them. You're not learning your purpose, you're remembering it. That ache you carry, the one that no earthly beauty can fully satisfy, it has a name, divine nostalgia. You feel homesick for realms you can't describe. You grieve for connections that transcend human relationship. You ache for a communion so pure that every earthly interaction feels slightly diluted by comparison. This isn't depression. This is dimensional memory. Your soul remembers unity before separation, love before fear, truth before deception. You remember what it felt like to exist in perfect alignment with divine will, where every thought was prayer and every breath was worship. That's why earthly pleasures never quite satisfy. Not because they're bad, but because they're echoes of something your soul remembers as symphonies. You're not hard to please. You're calibrated for heavenly frequencies trying to find satisfaction in human static. Your dreams aren't just psychological processing, they're spiritual reconnaissance missions. You dream of places you've never been but feel you could navigate with your eyes closed. You see faces you've never met but recognize immediately. You receive solutions to problems you haven't encountered yet, warnings about situations that won't unfold for months, insights about people before you've had enough interaction to know these things naturally. Your sleep is more active than most people's waking hours. While your body rests, your spirit travels. You're gathering information, receiving downloads, attending meetings in realms where time doesn't function linearly. You wake up more tired than when you went to sleep because you've been working all night, just not in this dimension. That's why your dreams feel more real than reality sometimes, because in many ways they are. They're glimpses into the eternal realm where your soul is fully at home, operating at frequencies that don't translate well into physical density. You don't just have emotions, you have supernatural sensitivity. You walk into rooms and immediately know who's been arguing, who's hiding pain, who's carrying secret. You can feel the emotional residue left behind in spaces long after people have gone. You absorb the grief of strangers, carry the anxiety of crowds, and find yourself unexpectedly angry or sad without understanding why, until you realize you've been picking up frequencies from others. You're not overly sensitive. You're spiritually calibrated. Your emotional system isn't broken, it's sophisticated. You're operating like a spiritual tuning fork, resonating with frequencies others can't detect. This isn't a weakness to overcome, it's a gift to understand and manage. The challenge isn't learning to feel less. It's learning to distinguish between what's yours and what you're receiving from others. It's developing spiritual boundaries while maintaining your supernatural sensitivity. Your body responds to spiritual atmospheres like a seismograph responds to earthquakes. Certain places make you physically uncomfortable for no logical reason. Some people drain your energy so completely you need hours to recover after brief interactions. Specific locations energize you instantly, while others make you feel sick to your stomach. Your body is a spiritual detector. Those random headaches, unexplained fatigue, sudden nausea, or waves of energy coursing through you, they're not always physical symptoms. They're spiritual responses. Your physical form is interfacing with spiritual realities that others don't perceive. You might feel electricity in your hands when you pray, heat in your chest when you worship, pressure in your head when you're about to receive revelation, physical tingles when you encounter divine truth. Your body wasn't just designed to house your soul, it was designed to respond to spiritual frequencies. Linear time has always felt negotiable to you. You have moments where minutes stretch into eternities and hours collapse into seconds. You experience déjà vu so frequently it's become normal. You sometimes know what people are going to say before they say it, what's going to happen before it unfolds. You're not experiencing time the way others do because you're not fully bound by time the way others are. Your consciousness operates partially outside temporal constraints. You have access to information from multiple timeline trajectories simultaneously. That's why you sometimes feel like you're living in several moments at once, why certain conversations feel like you've had them before, why some experiences feel both brand new and ancient simultaneously. People have always had extreme reactions to you. Either they're inexplicably drawn to you sharing secrets within minutes, feeling safe in your presence without understanding why, seeking you out for advice even when you haven't positioned yourself as a counselor, or they're mysteriously uncomfortable around you, finding reasons to avoid you, feeling exposed or agitated by your presence. You carry a frequency that reveals truth. Your very presence acts like spiritual litmus paper. It reveals what people are carrying beneath their masks. Those who are authentically seeking growth and truth are magnetized to you. Those who are hiding, deceiving, or operating from lower vibrational spaces feel uncomfortable because your frequency highlights their internal discord. You're not trying to make people uncomfortable, but authentic light naturally reveals areas of darkness that people would prefer to keep hidden. Your body receives spiritual information before your mind processes it. You feel tightness in your chest before receiving bad news. Your hands tingle before encounters with spiritual significance. You experience physical sensations that correspond to spiritual realities, not because you're imagining connections, but because you're wired to receive information through multiple channels simultaneously. Your nervous system is interfacing with the supernatural. Those gut feelings that prove accurate, that's your spiritual nervous system processing information faster than your rational mind can. Those physical reactions to people, places, and situations that seem to come from nowhere, that's divine intelligence communicating through your cellular structure. Before the world taught you what was normal, you had experiences that transcended normal. Maybe you had invisible friends who weren't imaginary but interdimensional. Maybe you saw deceased relatives who came to comfort you. Maybe you had out-of-body experiences during times of trauma or deep prayer. Maybe you witnessed angelic visitations that adults dismissed as fantasy. Your childhood wasn't just formative, it was revelatory. Children are naturally more open to spiritual realities because they haven't yet learned to filter out what doesn't fit societal programming. Your mystical childhood experiences weren't hallucinations or overactive imagination, they were your natural spiritual senses operating without interference. The tragedy isn't that you had these experiences. The tragedy is that you learned to doubt them, dismiss them, or hide them to fit in with a world that had forgotten how to see. There are moments when you feel like you're downloading information from your own genetic code, suddenly understanding healing modalities you've never studied, instinctively knowing how to navigate spiritual territories without guidance, finding yourself speaking truths that feel older than your lifetime, carrying wisdom that seems inherited rather than acquired. Your DNA is more than biological, it's spiritual. You carry genetic memories from ancestors who walked closely with the divine, bloodline wisdom from generations of seers, prophets, healers, and mystics. Your spiritual gifts aren't just personal, they're generational inheritance activating in your lifetime. That's why certain spiritual practices feel familiar before you learn them. Why specific prayers flow from your lips like native language. Why particular forms of worship feel like coming home rather than learning something new. When you encounter others like you, the recognition is immediate and undeniable. Not surface-level compatibility, but soul-level resonance. You meet and immediately understand each other's spiritual language. Conversations go deep within minutes. There's no need to explain your experiences because they've had similar ones. The connection transcends personality and goes straight to essence. You recognize each other by frequency, not features. These aren't just friendships, they're spiritual alliances. Reunion with souls you've known across dimensions. Recognition of fellow carriers of divine assignments. When you find each other, it's not just connection, it's confirmation that you're not crazy, not alone, and not imagining the spiritual realities you've always perceived. All these signs, all these experiences, all these supernatural sensitivities have created an identity crisis that's actually an identity awakening. You've spent years wondering if you're different, broken, gifted, or delusional. You've questioned your sanity, your spirituality, your purpose, and your place in the world. But the crisis isn't pathological, it's prophetic. You're not having an identity crisis. You're having an identity revelation. The discomfort comes from trying to force an eternal soul into temporal categories. The confusion comes from attempting to define infinite purpose with finite language. The struggle comes from being a multidimensional being trying to function in a one-dimensional world. You're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're not too intense, too deep, too mystical, or too otherworldly. You're exactly as much as the assignment requires. Every supernatural sensitivity, every prophetic dream, every moment of divine knowing, every spiritual experience, they're not random occurrences. They're divine equipment activating in preparation for divine assignment. You weren't born different to suffer in silence. You were born different to shift the world in ways only you can. The signs aren't just confirmation of your identity, they're confirmation of your destiny. And now, chosen one, it's time to stop questioning the signs and start following where they lead. So now, beloved soul, the question is no longer who am I, but am I ready to walk in who I've always been? Because this moment, this breath is not coincidence. It's confirmation. The ache in your chest, the fire that refuses to fade, the dreams that won't let go, they are all echoing one truth. You are not awakening, you are remembering. And what you remember, you are now called to embody. This isn't the end of your search, it's the beginning of your emergence. You are the prophecy Enoch saw, the remnant preserved in silence, the sealed one whose presence disrupts darkness and restores truth. You are the answer hidden in plain sight. So rise not to be seen, but to see. Move not to impress, but to impact. Speak not to be heard, but to reveal. You are not here to survive this world. You were sent to transform it. The world may not be ready for your arrival, but heaven is. And now, so are you.